And can I just make one added comment? I think we need, Ann referred to the shortness of the school year and the shortness of the school week. We're kind of locked in a system of, it's supposed to be 4 years, certain number of credits, certain number of hours of seat time. Guess what? We're in the age of technology. To what extent are these institutions using technology, and how much time is really necessary? There's more and more talk, good or bad, about college should be 3 years, or it should be merged with after college in a shorter time frame. I think the whole question of the way in which we structure education is really locked into a time when GM made more cars than any company in the world.
Representative Gary Daniels, New Hampshire. During the summer, I was actually deliberating over the dilemma that the things that all three of you have mentioned. What I ended up with was a bill that I have submitted for New Hampshire for next year. It's an incentive bill. And what this bill does, it gives the local communities the option of voting it in to be part of it or not. So I'm not taking that right away from the voters. But the first thing I did is I went to my school superintendent, who confirmed the number of remedial educational courses that need to be taken. And I asked her the direct question, because I know that they had recently realigned their education, the curriculum, and she is the curriculum coordinator. So I said, to what standard have you aligned? And she said, well, the state. And then I asked, well, how much does the state match the college expectations? And she didn't know. So the bill that I put in says that if a student graduates before the end of the 12th year, that they would get half of that per student cost for the year as a scholarship for higher education if they also passed the state assessment test. So by example, you have someone graduate at the end of the 11th year, the student cost for that community is $10,000 per student. The student would be... the student would... Wait for him to pick up. The student would pick up a $5,000 scholarship in that. But we wanted to, number one, make sure that they just didn't graduate early, but by passing the assessment test, that they had some of those skills. Now, my thought process was that requiring them to pass those assessment tests and graduate early is going to require some real, and to meet the college expectations, is going to cause another realignment of the curriculum. But it also, in order to do that, most people would normally have to go to virtual education courses, which I'm also a big advocate of it. For the child, it gives them an opportunity for some extra college money. For the parent who may not afford to send their child to education, maybe they get further involved with the child's education now because they see some money out there that's basically free money in their eyes if they simply help their child progress. By getting them into the college at that level and interested in learning, we hope then that would carry over, and I would expect that the Workforce Opportunity Council that we have in state will tie into that and try to use the colleges as a feeder for the jobs that they need. But that's just one way that I approach the problem. Thank you. Actually, do you know any other schools or any other states that are doing similar things?
We're certainly seeing a number of states that are doing dual enrollment type of efforts, which effectively can allow a student to graduate in 3 years if he or she is enrolled in that. I know this is happening in the Minnesota state system and others. So that's the one area in which I'm aware. I think another thing that many legislators are starting to look at is not simply rewarding or appropriating on the basis of those who enroll, but basically waiting until they get through a semester or there's some indication that they're actually progressing and having some success so that it's not a matter of just the numbers at the beginning, but whether or not the school is getting them through. The problem there obviously is that you don't want your quality to go down as institutions try to find ways to move the kids through, so that there is that issue. But I know that's another thing that legislators are starting to look at. Do you all have anything to add?
Thank you. Nancy McLean, State of Arizona. We actually passed a bill similar to what the gentleman from New Hampshire was describing, where it was called the early scholarship tuition or something like that. The school districts, of course, had a complaint that if they lost a student in the 12th year or even in the 11th year, that they were losing money because we do pay the ADM. So we tried to rectify that by saying, okay, you'll get, even though the student has graduated, you will get half of the amount that we would ordinarily give for that. Unfortunately, Arizona's financial situation is so drastic this year and last year that even though we passed that bill, we haven't been able to implement it yet because the schools are just screaming that they need more money, and frankly, we don't have the money now to implement it to give the student the money to go on to college. But we did pass it. It's just on hold for right now.
We've talked a little bit about providing more money, and certainly in the 9 years that I ran the Hispanic Scholarship Fund, I raised $280 million for students to go to college, and so it was all about scholarship. But maybe tying together the three comments, whether it's Hawaii, New Hampshire, or Arizona, one of the things that we haven't talked about today is the cost issue and the rising cost of a higher education in this country today. I mean, growing at twice the rate of inflation for at least the last 30 years, I mean, we could be chasing our tail. And whether it's, Ann mentioned the capacity issue and spare space in the classroom, when we have a graduation rate in this country that's 83%, a high school graduation rate of 83%, and you look at the African American, the Hispanic, and the Native Americans, and you see that between 50 and maybe 77%, imagine what some of those monies could do to get the students that are dropping out to stay in school with the curriculum that we're talking about. But fundamentally, if we don't address, one of the favorite things that I heard from my colleague who ran federal student aid, he came in full of vim and vigor and said, well, the problem is the state legislatures, they're not appropriating enough money for higher education. And I said, you know what, let's not mix apples and oranges here. If you look at what a state provides, and if you look at cost of education, doubling it or rising at more than twice the rate of inflation for 25 years, of course it's going to be a smaller percentage, because even if they're sending the same amount of money over, it's a smaller piece of the pie. We can't continue to judge how much state legislatures appropriate unless we address the fundamental issue of cost. And the reason I worry so much about cost is if we are successful in reforming K through 12, Art mentioned the 90% of jobs, the fastest growing jobs that require post-secondary credentials. The National Association of Manufacturers says by 2012, 40% of factory floor jobs are going to require post-secondary math. And 60% of the fastest growing jobs, by 2012 we're going to have 3 million jobs in this country that we won't have enough college graduates to fill. We need to increase capacity for post-secondary education in this country, and frankly we can't do it with the model that we have today. It's too expensive for this country. So one of the things that I'm hopeful in California has as tough a budget. In fact, my brother was visiting from Texas and he said, can I pay everywhere in IOUs? I mean, if the state's paying in IOUs, can I as a private citizen pay in IOUs? One of the things that I would have to ask, particularly seeing what's happening at the University of California system, is what if we redid Rethink so that we have more virtual learning? What if certain campuses offered the first 60 hours and other campuses offered the advanced? What if we were able to look, and so the pressure on funding from the states, the pressure on funding from the federal government wouldn't be as severe? That's kind of that polarizing conversation that I was talking about earlier. If we're going to meet the need that our citizens have for a revamped K through 12 and advanced post-secondary education, the model for today, and I know I could get Ann going, if the only thing that's really respected is that what's regionally accredited versus the new ideas that are nationally accredited, then we end up with transfer credit issues. We're not going to solve our way through this, and so I applaud what you're doing, but I would ask us all to think about, and I know some states, I know Nebraska's looking at it, I know the University of Wisconsin system looked at at least using their supplying and having one source supplier contracts. But we're at the fringes of something very fundamental to higher education reform, and that's the cost issue.